Hello and welcome back to HRD Live, where I'm now joined by Kerry Smith from the British Heart Foundation. Kerry, thank you for joining me.
Thank you for inviting me.
Wonderful. So what have you been sharing with the audiences today at the summit during the session?
Okay, so my session today has been on our Live Well, Work Well, which is our health and wellbeing programme, which is about how we have put the wellbeing programme at the DNA of our organisation, which you might think is obvious because we are the British Heart Foundation and we're all about health and wellbeing. But actually, we, like many other HR directors, are kind of grappling with how do you really get people engaged with and taking part in health and wellbeing activities that then make a difference to your organisational measures.
Right. I think a lot of HR leaders and businesses generally find that a really difficult challenge, kind of like combining well-being with strategy and how you operate your business in that way.
Yes.
How did that work for the British Heart Foundation? How did you cement that and get that together?
Well, the good news is we've got it absolutely integral in our company strategy. So the 2030 strategy has very much a strategic goal to improve the safety and wellness and happiness and inclusivity of all our people. But it wasn't that case 5 years ago, where actually we weren't doing very much to support our people in terms of themselves. We did a lot of promotion of healthy ways of living, health and wellbeing, outcomes of our research to people outside of the BHF, but we weren't necessarily reflecting that internally and ensuring that our own people got those messages and took it on board themselves. Wow. So we've actually done quite a lot of work over the last 5 years to get people to start to see themselves as ambassadors and advocates of good heart health. And so to do that, we've needed people to engage in a number of activities. And we started out by running a bit of a survey, and I was telling the group I was talking to earlier that I had great trepidation of this survey because we were asking people very personal questions I wouldn't even ask my friends. We were asking our staff, like, how much alcohol do you have per week? Do you ever take a break? Do you have breakfast? And how much do you weigh?
Right.
And expecting a bit of a backlash, we actually got the opposite. People took part, they answered these questions, they gave us a lot of information, and we now know, and we're able to track those figures year on year, and we now have what is quite phenomenal. We have an organisation-wide BMI. And guess what? We're overweight.
Wow, it's fascinating. And I think one of the issues here, I think maybe the organisation faces is around responsibility. Where does the responsibility for this lie? Business, who should take that on that role?
Yeah.
Do you think, is it a leadership issue in business that leaders need to kind of champion this? Or is it a cultural issue? Where do you think that responsibility lies?
Both actually.
Right.
Because what was interesting for us is we had read our own product that we as the BHF would go out to other organisations and market and sell and say, this is how you look after your people and encourage your people to feel connected. We weren't actually translating that internally. And if you think about how our people, our staff, 4,500, 22,000 volunteers, they are all our customers as well as our staff. So we needed to make sure that they had the information that we were giving to others and bringing that internally. So our leaders had to demonstrate that. I myself took on events, I championed events, and I showed that I need to look after my health. But I also need to use the insight and the intelligence that the organisation has to make a difference to that. So we worked in tandem with our Health at Work programme, and it was quite an interesting journey because we said, come and help us set this up. Then we thought, actually, we're doing more than you're doing because we've got a huge number of leaders and ambassadors that are taking part in activities. And actually, we're doing more than you're doing for other organisations now. That turned their heads. They joined us. Then it got to a point where actually we needed a bit more specialist help and advice. I know lots of different companies will have their own health and wellbeing partners and providers. I happened to have one in-house that we could use, but that's enabled us then to really take it off. But even then, even with working with a provider, it's still difficult, and you often need that expertise to help you do things. So one of the key areas for us is we kind of looked at our own health and wellbeing health at work programme and discovered that actually if you're going to make any difference to this, you need to get under the surface and start looking at individuals' health.
Right.
So we started doing checks on things like blood pressure, cholesterol, glucose levels, and weight. And people actually, our staff, put themselves forward and said, I'm happy to have a go. We discovered things, we were shocked. We discovered that people had undiagnosed high blood pressure. Some people had to send straight off to the doctors. They didn't know they had it. We discovered that people were on the verge of getting diabetes, didn't know they had it. And some of these people were quite close. Some of these people we know and are part of those 4,500 staff, but they actually had, were quite concerned they didn't know it. Yet they've been working for a health organisation for many years and didn't know it. So it wasn't until we uncovered that and used that clinical help and advice that we started to realise there's much more we can do, more advice we can give, more activities, more targeted and focused.
Of course.
Yeah, and as a result, just to kind of show that it does make a difference to the bottom line, we've seen an increase in our engagement. We've seen a decrease in our staff turnover. So people are staying because they feel more cared for. They think that, they realise that we absolutely do care about people and want to make a difference.
Clearly, I mean, there's a clear line there from making that change to the effect then in terms of engagement and retention, things like that.
Yes.
So there's a very, very clear reasons to do this as a business. But for those business leaders and HR leaders watching who want to do that, and maybe just having any idea of how to do so, what would perhaps be your top tip to just get things started, to start thinking about making that change around wellbeing in your organisation in that way?
Yes, I think I would say two things really. One, lead from the front. So make sure that your chief exec and your executive group and your HR director are absolutely walking the talk, and they're running events themselves. I did a big kind of fast walk. I'm not a runner, so I did a speed walk instead, and it was called Keeping Up with Kerry, and got a huge amount of support. If our chief exec has done 10Ks and so on, and people have really got behind it. So I think be that person, be the person you want other people to be, and I think secondly, make sure you've got your health and wellbeing partner, the right person. And we're lucky enough to have the BHF Health at Work programme. They can help, but also whoever your partner is, make sure you're getting best value out of them, and they're helping you look at all the risk factors, because we are the British Heart Foundation, so we know that the risk factors do impact your health, and will determine whether you've got a risk of having a heart attack yourself. Wow. So understand your numbers, as we always say, understand your risks, and get under the surface of those with those initial tests, and provide those for your staff would be my advice.
Fantastic. Kerry, thank you so much for joining us on HRD Live.
Yeah.
I really appreciate it.
You're very welcome.
Stay tuned, guys, for more very soon.